The transmission came at the darkest hour of the Valanthi homeworld. Ambassador Kethral stood in the communications center, his forearms trembling as the emergency beacon pulsed through the ancient crystal arrays. Around him, the city of Sirath burned. Through the reinforced windows, he could see the Devourer fleet descending from the purple sky like a swarm of metal locusts. Their ships were ugly things, black and twisted, covered in spines and weapons that glowed with sickly green light. "The beacon is broadcasting," said Communications Officer Yenth, her voice hollow with fear. "But, Ambassador, no one will come. The collective has already refused us. The merchant guilds have fled. Even the Corsani Empire has closed its borders." Kethral knew she spoke the truth. For 300 cycles, the Valanthi had been a peaceful species. They were scholars and artists. They built libraries instead of warships. They wrote poetry instead of battle plans. And now, that peace had made them weak in the eyes of the galaxy. The Devourers had appeared from beyond the Outer Rim 6 months ago. No one knew where they came from. No one knew what they wanted. They did not negotiate. They did not demand surrender. They simply consumed. World after world fell silent as their fleets passed through. Species that had existed for thousands of years vanished in weeks. "There is one more frequency," Kethral said quietly. "One we have never used." Yenth looked at him with wide, silver eyes. "You cannot mean the human channel. Ambassador, they are primitives. They only achieved faster than light travel 2 centuries ago. Their ships are crude. Their culture is violent and chaotic. The Galactic Council does not even recognize them as a civilized species." "The Council also said the Devourers could be reasoned with," Kethral replied bitterly. "The Council said our defensive fleet would hold for at least a year. The Council has been wrong about everything." He moved to the communication array and began entering the frequency that every spacefaring species knew, but none ever used. The human emergency channel. It was considered an insult to contact them, a sign of absolute desperation. The other races mocked the humans behind their backs. They called them the angry children of the galaxy, the violent newcomers who built weapons instead of wonders. But Kethral had read the reports that the Council tried to bury. Reports of human ships engaging pirate fleets 10 times their size and winning. Reports of human colonies that had been attacked by raiders and somehow, impossibly, fought back with nothing but mining equipment and determination. Reports of a species that simply refused to die. "This is Ambassador Kethral of the Valanthi Sovereignty," he spoke into the transmitter, his voice steady despite his fear. "Our world is under attack by the Devourer fleet. We have no military. We have no weapons. We have only our people, and they are dying. If anyone receives this message, please help us. We will give anything. We will pay any price. Please." The message went out into the void. Kethral did not expect a response. The humans were far away on the other side of the galaxy. Even if they heard, even if they cared, they could never arrive in time. The city shook as another Devourer bombardment struck the shields. The protective barrier was failing. Within hours, it would collapse entirely, and then the monsters would descend to feed. Kethral had seen recordings of what the Devourers did to captured populations. He prayed his people would die quickly. "Ambassador," Yenth whispered, "there is a response coming through." He turned so fast he nearly fell. "What?" Static filled the speakers, and then a voice cut through. It was rough and confident. Human. "Valanthi vessel. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Navy Dreadnought Prometheus. We received your distress call. Confirm your coordinates and the size of the hostile fleet." Kethral could barely speak. "Admiral, the Devourer fleet numbers approximately 400 vessels. They have already destroyed our orbital defenses. We have no combat capability remaining." There was a pause. When the human spoke again, her voice had changed. It was harder now. Colder. 400 ships. Copy that. How much time do you have? Perhaps 6 hours before our shields fail completely. We can be there in 4. Hold your position, Ambassador. Help is coming. The transmission ended. Kethrall stared at the silent equipment in disbelief. 1 ship, Yenth said. She is bringing 1 ship against 400 devourers. Ambassador, the humans are insane. But Kethrall had noticed something in the Admiral's voice. Something that the other races did not understand about humans. When they made a promise, they kept it. When they said they were coming, they came. And when they went to war, they did not stop until their enemies were ash. The next 4 hours were the longest of Kethrall's life. The Devourers continued their bombardment. The shields dropped to 60%, then 40, then 20. In the streets below, his people huddled in shelters, waiting for death. The few Valanthi ships that remained had been destroyed trying to evacuate civilians. There was nowhere to run. There was nothing to do but wait. And then the sky split open. A tear appeared in the fabric of space itself. It was not like the smooth transitions of normal, faster-than-light travel. This was violent, brutal. The air itself seemed to scream as reality was forced apart by sheer power. Through the tear came the Prometheus. Kethrall had seen warships before. The Collective's patrol vessels were elegant things, all smooth curves and efficient design. The Corsani Empire built massive carriers that dwarfed most space stations. But he had never seen anything like this. The human dreadnought was a mountain of metal and fury. It was 5 kilometers long, covered in armor plates that looked thick enough to stop asteroid impacts. Weapons bristled from every surface, massive cannons that could destroy a city with a single shot, missile pods that could launch thousands of warheads, point defense systems that filled the space around it with a wall of fire, and it was not alone. Behind the Prometheus, more tiers opened in space. More ships emerged, dreadnoughts and battlecruisers and destroyers, each one a testament to human engineering. They were not beautiful ships. They were not elegant or efficient. They were weapons, pure and simple, designed for one purpose only: to destroy their enemies completely. Ambassador, Yenth breathed. There are 37 human vessels. 37 against 400. Any other species would have called it suicide. But as Kethrall watched the human fleet form into battle formation, he saw something that made his heart lift for the first time in months. The Devourers were hesitating. Their ships had been moving in perfect coordination, preparing to break through the shields and begin their harvest. But now they were pulling back, reorganizing. For the first time since they had appeared, the monsters seemed uncertain. Admiral Chen's voice came through the open channel. Not a private transmission this time, but a broadcast on all frequencies. She wanted the Devourers to hear. Attention, Devourer Fleet. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Navy. The Valanthi people are under our protection. You will withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The Devourer response was a burst of static and clicking sounds. Their language, if it could be called that, had never been translated. No one knew if they even understood communication in the traditional sense. I'll take that as a no, Chen said. All ships, weapons free. Let's show these things what happens when they mess with our friends. The Prometheus opened fire. Kethrall had read about human weapons. He had seen videos and technical specifications, but nothing had prepared him for the reality. The Dreadnought's main guns were massive electromagnetic accelerators that fired tungsten rounds at nearly the speed of light. Each shot carried enough energy to crack a small moon. The first volley struck the center of the Devourer formation. 3 ships simply ceased to exist, vaporized by impacts they never saw coming. Another 6 were crippled, their engines destroyed, their hulls torn open to the vacuum. The rest of the human fleet joined in. Missiles screamed across the void, their warheads splitting into dozens of independent seekers. Beam weapons traced lines of light through the darkness. Railguns hammered at Devourer shields until they collapsed. The Devourers fought back. Their own weapons were powerful, strange energy beams that seemed to drain the life from whatever they touched. They launched swarms of smaller craft that attached themselves to human ships like parasites, trying to bore through the armor. But the humans had come prepared. The Dreadnoughts were covered in automated defense systems that tracked and destroyed the smaller craft before they could attach. The armor was layered with exotic alloys that resisted the energy drains. And when a Devourer beam did manage to breach a human ship, the crew inside did not panic. They sealed the damaged sections, rerouted power, and kept fighting. In the communication center, Kethral watched the battle unfold on his screens. He had studied military history. He knew the theories of space combat that the older races had developed over millennia. The humans seemed to ignore all of them. They did not fight at range, picking apart enemies with precision strikes. They closed to point-blank distance and unleashed everything they had. They did not retreat when damaged. They pushed forward, using their wounded ships as shields for the ones behind. They did not target command vessels or critical systems. They simply destroyed everything in front of them. "They fight like animals," Yenth whispered. "No strategy, no finesse, just pure aggression." "No," Kethral corrected her. "They fight like predators, and for the first time, the Devourers have met something that can prey on them." The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, the Devourer fleet had been reduced to debris. 392 ships destroyed, 8 captured for study. Not a single vessel escaped. The humans had lost 7 ships, 2,800 crew members dead. Admiral Chen requested permission to recover the bodies before beginning rescue operations on the planet below. Kethral granted it immediately. He also ordered that monuments be built in each crew member's name. They would stand in the heart of Cyrath so that every Valanthi would remember who had saved them. When Admiral Chen's shuttle finally landed in the ruined city, Kethral was there to meet her. She was smaller than he expected. Humans were a compact species, barely reaching his chest. But there was something in her eyes that made him understand why the Devourers had feared them. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "You saved us. You saved all of us." Chen looked at the burning city, at the frightened refugees emerging from shelters, at the Devourer wreckage falling through the atmosphere like shooting stars. Her expression was tired but satisfied. "We received your call," she said simply. "Humans don't ignore people asking for help." "It's not who we are." "But we are strangers to you. The galaxy has called you primitives and barbarians. Why would you risk so much for us?" The Admiral smiled. It was a strange expression on her war-hardened face. "Because once, a long time ago, my species was weak too. We were scattered across one small planet, fighting each other, nearly destroying ourselves a dozen times. And we survived because when things got bad, we helped each other. Not because it was smart, not because it was profitable, because it was right." She extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting. Kethral took it with 2 of his own. "The Devourers will come back," Chen continued. "They'll bring more ships, bigger fleets, and when they do, they won't find the Valanthi alone. The United Earth Navy is officially extending its protection to your people. Anyone who wants to hurt you will have to go through us first." Kethral felt tears sliding down his face. It was not a dignified response for an ambassador. He did not care. "We have nothing to offer you," he admitted. "No resources, no technology, no military strength. Why would you protect us?" Admiral Chen's smile faded, replaced by something harder, something that looked like anger, but was directed at the burning sky. "Because the galaxy needs to learn something," she said. "Being peaceful doesn't make you worthless. Building libraries instead of weapons doesn't make you weak. And just because someone can't fight back doesn't mean they deserve to die." She turned to look at him directly. "The older races forgot that. They built their empires on strength and left the weak to suffer. But humans remember what it was like to be small, to be afraid, to have no one come when you called for help. We won't let that happen to anyone else, not while we're still breathing. In that moment, Ambassador Kethral understood why the Galactic Council feared humans. It was not their weapons or their aggression. It was their compassion, their stubborn, irrational belief that everyone deserved protection. It made them unpredictable. It made them dangerous. And it made them exactly what the galaxy needed. The fires of Sirath would burn for weeks. But as Kethral stood beside Admiral Chen and watched human rescue teams begin pulling survivors from the rubble, he knew that his people would rebuild. They would remember this day forever. The day that the youngest species in the galaxy had answered their call. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Valanthi Prime. The word spread through the galaxy like wildfire. A species that most had dismissed as primitive savages had done what no one else could. They had stopped the Devourers. They had actually won. In the gleaming halls of the Galactic Council station, reactions ranged from disbelief to terror. The collective's delegation demanded proof, certain that the reports were exaggerated. The Corsani Empire's representatives whispered among themselves, their scaled faces showing concern. The merchant guilds calculated the economic implications of a new military power rising on the galactic stage. But for the smaller species, the forgotten ones who had been abandoned when the Devourers came, the news sparked something that had been absent for years. Hope. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the United Earth Embassy, reading the stack of communications that had flooded in over the past weeks. Distress calls, pleas for help, desperate messages from worlds that had been told by their own governments that rescue was impossible. "How many?" asked Captain Marcus Webb, her second in command. 47 distinct requests, Chen replied. From species I've never even heard of. The Trellick Collective, the Moth People of Varashk, something called the Singing Stones of Keleth Prime. Webb frowned. We don't have the ships to help all of them. Even with the new Dreadnoughts being built back home, we can barely maintain our current commitments. I know. Chen set down the communications and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the massive council station, a beautiful structure of crystal and light that had stood for 10,000 years, a monument to galactic civilization. But the council has 60 member species, combined fleets of over 5,000 warships. Why aren't they responding? The answer came from Dr. Yuki Tanaka, Earth's chief diplomatic advisor. She was a small woman with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Because the council was never designed to protect anyone, she said. It exists to maintain the balance of power between the major species. The weak are expected to either become strong enough to matter or accept their fate. There's no mechanism for collective defense, no obligation for the powerful to help the powerless. Chen's hands clenched into fists. That's insane. The Devourers aren't targeting the weak on purpose. They're consuming everything in their path. Eventually, they'll reach the council species too. Eventually is a long time in politics, Tanaka replied. The collective believes they can negotiate when their territory is threatened. The Corsani think their military strength will deter any attack. The merchants are already planning to profit from Devourer salvage. None of them see this as their problem yet. Then we make it their problem. Chen turned from the window. Her face was set with determination that Webb had learned to recognize. It meant she was about to do something dangerous and brilliant. The council meets tomorrow to discuss the Valanthi incident, she continued. They've agreed to let me speak. I intend to propose something that will change everything. The next day, the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council was filled to capacity. Representatives from every member species had gathered, along with observers from dozens of non-aligned worlds. News drones floated overhead, broadcasting the proceedings to trillions of beings across known space. Admiral Chen walked to the central podium alone. She was still wearing her uniform, still carrying the sidearm that had caused scandals when she refused to surrender it at the entrance. Protocol demanded civilian attire for diplomatic functions. Chen had never cared much for protocol. "Distinguished representatives," she began. 3 months ago, a peaceful species called out for help. They were not members of your council. They had no trade agreements or military alliances that obligated anyone to assist them. They were simply people in danger, people who were going to die. The hall was silent. On the massive screens surrounding the chamber, images of the Battle of Valanthi Prime began to play. Human dreadnoughts exchanging fire with devourer ships, explosions lighting up the darkness of space, the broken hulks of enemy vessels drifting through the void. "The United Earth Navy answered that call," Chen continued. "We lost 7 ships and thousands of crew members, good people who will never go home to their families, and we did it for strangers, for a species we had never met, who had nothing to offer us in return." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the assembled delegates. "I know what many of you think of humanity: primitives, barbarians, a violent species that barely deserves to travel between stars. And maybe you're right. We are violent. We built weapons before we built anything else. We conquered our own world through war and bloodshed that would horrify most of you." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was not the diplomatic speech they had expected. But we also learned something from all that violence. We learned that the only way to survive is to stand together. When our ancestors faced extinction, they didn't calculate who deserved to live based on economic value or military strength. They fought for each other because that was the only way forward. She activated her own display, projecting holographic images of the communications she had received. "These are distress calls. 47 species facing extinction at the hands of the devourers. 47 peoples who have sent messages to this council and received no response. 47 civilizations that will be erased from history while you debate and calculate and wait for someone else to act." The collective's chief delegate rose from his seat. He was a tall being covered in iridescent scales, his voice smooth and measured. "Admiral Chen, we appreciate humanity's contributions to galactic security. However, the Council cannot commit resources to every minor conflict in the galaxy. Our member species have their own concerns, their own territories to protect. We cannot save everyone." "You're right," Chen agreed. "You can't save everyone. No one can. But you could save some. You could try. Instead, you hide behind procedures and protocols while entire civilizations burn." "The Admiral speaks out of turn," the Corsani representative growled. He was a massive creature, nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and a face like a nightmare. "Humanity has been a spacefaring species for barely 200 years. They do not understand the complexities of galactic politics." Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "You're right about that, too. I don't understand how you can watch billions of innocents die and call it complexity. I don't understand how the strongest military power in the known galaxy can refuse to use that strength to protect the helpless, and I don't understand how any of you can sleep at night." The hall erupted into noise. Delegates shouted at each other. Security forces moved closer to the podium. But Chen stood her ground, her voice rising above the chaos. "I'm not here to lecture you. I'm here to make a proposal. The United Earth Navy is going to help those 47 species. We're going to send every ship we can spare, every soldier willing to volunteer, every resource we can scrape together. We're going to fight the devourers wherever they appear, for whoever asks, regardless of politics or profit." She took a breath. "And we're inviting anyone who wants to join us. Not the council, not the governments, the individuals, the soldiers and pilots and engineers who became warriors because they wanted to protect people, the ones who joined their militaries because they believed in something bigger than themselves." The chamber fell silent again. This was unprecedented. She was not addressing the governments. She was speaking directly to the citizens of the galaxy. The United Earth Navy is forming the first galactic volunteer fleet. Anyone who wants to stand with us against the darkness is welcome. We don't care what species you are or where you come from. We only care that you're willing to fight. The collective's delegate was sputtering with outrage. This is unprecedented. This is a violation of sovereignty. You cannot recruit our citizens. I'm not recruiting anyone, Chen replied calmly. I'm offering a choice. Your governments have decided that protecting the weak isn't worth the cost. I'm giving individuals the chance to disagree. She turned to face the news drones directly, knowing that her next words would reach every corner of civilized space. To everyone watching this broadcast, the Devourers are coming. They will not stop. They will not negotiate. They will consume everything in their path until nothing remains. Your governments have chosen to wait and see, but you don't have to. Her voice hardened. If you want to stand with humanity, if you want to fight for something that matters, if you want to be remembered as someone who made a difference when the galaxy needed it most, come find us. The Prometheus will be waiting at the Valanthi system. Bring whatever you have. Bring whatever you can. She paused, and when she spoke again, there was fire in her voice. Let's show the Devourers what happens when the children of the galaxy stop being afraid. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours of Chen's speech, volunteer applications began flooding the human communication networks. Soldiers from the collective who were disgusted by their government's cowardice, Corsani warriors who felt their empire had lost its honor. Scientists and engineers and pilots from species that had no military tradition but wanted to contribute anyway. They came by the hundreds, then by the thousands. Ships began appearing at Valanthi Prime, everything from personal yachts to decommissioned military vessels. Their crews were a patchwork of species, united only by their determination to fight. Captain Webb stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching the fleet assemble on the main screen. It was chaos. Beautiful, inspiring chaos. We have no unified command structure, he said. No standardized communication protocols. Half these ships can't even interface with our targeting systems. Then we figure it out, Chen replied. We train together. We learn to work together. We become something new. Ambassador Kethral had joined them on the human Dreadnought. The Valanthi had no ships to contribute, but they had offered their world as a staging ground for the volunteer fleet. It was the least they could do, he had said, though Chen knew it was far more than that. The Council is furious, Kethral reported. They are discussing sanctions against Earth, trade restrictions, possible military action. Chen laughed, though there was no humor in it. Let them. By the time they finish debating, we'll have either won or died. Either way, their sanctions won't matter. You know they will never forgive this, the ambassador said quietly. You are undermining everything they have built. The balance of power, the hierarchy of species, the entire order of galactic civilization. Good, Chen replied, because that order let your people almost die. That hierarchy decided some species were worth saving and others weren't. If the galaxy has to change for the innocent to be protected, then the galaxy needs to change. News came 3 weeks later. The Devourers had appeared at the edge of the Outer Rim, a vast fleet larger than anything they had deployed before. Intelligence estimates put the number at over 1,000 ships, including several massive vessels that had never been seen in previous engagements. They were headed for the Trellic homeworld, a species of insectoid beings who had achieved spaceflight only a century ago. Their entire military consisted of 40 patrol vessels designed to chase away pirates. The Council refused to act. The Trellic were not members. They had no allies. They were, in the cold calculation of galactic politics, expendable. Admiral Chen received their distress call at midnight. By dawn, the first galactic volunteer fleet was on the move. They numbered 312 ships, human dreadnoughts at the core, surrounded by vessels from every corner of the galaxy. Corsani heavy cruisers that had been mothballed when their crews defected, collective science vessels retrofitted with human weapons, ancient Valanthi exploration ships that had been pulled from museums and given new engines. It was a ragtag armada held together by hope and determination. It had no business fighting the largest Devourer fleet ever assembled. But as the fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Trellick system, as they saw the enemy ships spreading across space like a plague, not one crew member suggested retreat. "All hands," Admiral Chen's voice came through every speaker on every ship. "This is what we signed up for. This is why we're here. Somewhere behind us, billions of innocent beings are counting on us to stop these monsters. They're praying to whatever gods they have that someone will save them." She stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, surrounded by her crew, humans and aliens working side by side, united in purpose. "I can't promise we'll all survive this. I can't promise we'll win, but I can promise you this. Whatever happens today, the galaxy will remember. They'll remember that when the darkness came, there were those who stood against it, not for glory, not for profit, but because it was right." She drew her sidearm and raised it high. "All ships, weapons free. Let's light these monsters up." The first Galactic Volunteer Fleet charged into battle, and the Devourers, for the first time in their long history of conquest, faced an enemy that would not run, an enemy that had come from every corner of the galaxy, united by a simple human belief that no one should have to face the Battle of Trellick Prime would be remembered as the moment everything changed. The Volunteer Fleet met the Devourer Armada in the shadow of the system's gas giant. Space erupted into chaos as weapons discharged across thousands of kilometers. Human railguns punched through enemy hulls, while energy beams from collective vessels carved burning lines through the darkness. Corsani warriors, their blood singing with the thrill of honorable combat, drove their heavy cruisers directly into Devourer formations, creating openings for smaller ships to exploit. Admiral Chen commanded from the Prometheus, her tactical display showing the battle in real time. They were outnumbered 3-1. Their ships were not designed to work together. Half their communication protocols were incompatible, and somehow, impossibly, they were winning. "Enemy flagship identified," her tactical officer reported. A Corsani defector named Grosh, who had been the first alien to join the volunteer fleet. His massive form was hunched over a console designed for human hands, but he worked the controls with surprising delicacy. "Massive structure, nearly 10 kilometers long. It's coordinating the other vessels." Chen studied the readings. The Devourer flagship was unlike anything in the fleet's databases. It was not a ship in any conventional sense. It looked organic, almost alive, its hull pulsing with strange lights. Tendrils of energy connected it to the other Devourer vessels, like a spider at the center of a web. "If we take that thing down, we might break their coordination," she said. "Get me a firing solution." "Admiral, the flagship is heavily defended. We would have to push through at least 200 enemy ships to reach it." Chen turned to look at her bridge crew, human faces mixed with alien ones. All of them tired, all of them scared, all of them ready. "Then we push through," she said simply. "Signal the fleet. We're going straight down their throat." The volunteer armada formed into a wedge, with the Prometheus at the tip. They accelerated toward the Devourer formation, firing continuously. Enemy ships exploded around them. Friendly vessels died beside them. But they kept moving forward, cutting through the Devourer fleet like a blade through flesh. Private Yuki Tanaka's daughter, Lieutenant Maya Tanaka, commanded one of the forward destroyers. Her ship had taken heavy damage in the initial engagement. 3 decks were open to vacuum, half her crew was dead or wounded, but her engines still worked, and her weapons were still firing. "Lieutenant, we're losing containment on the main reactor," her engineering officer reported. Maya looked at the tactical display. The Prometheus was 200 kilometers ahead, surrounded by devourer ships. If her destroyer fell back now, the flagship would lose one less ship protecting its flank. "How long until we breach?" she asked. "Maybe 20 minutes, maybe less." 20 minutes, enough time to make a difference. "Divert all power to engines and forward weapons," Maya ordered. "We're going to clear a path for the Admiral. Lieutenant, if the reactor breaches while we're at full power, the explosion will vaporize everything within 50 kilometers. Maya smiled grimly. "Then we better make sure we're next to something worth vaporizing." The destroyer surged forward, passing the Prometheus and diving into the heart of the Devourer formation. Weapons blazing, the small ship carved a bloody path through enemy vessels, drawing fire away from the human flagship. Chen watched on her display as the destroyer approached the Devourer command ship. She understood what Lieutenant Tanaka was planning. She wanted to order her to stop, to pull back, to save herself. But she knew Maya would not listen. Some things were more important than survival. The destroyer struck the Devourer flagship at full speed, its reactor breaching at the moment of impact. The explosion was visible across the entire system. A sun, briefly born and died in the space of seconds, consuming everything around it. The Devourer flagship was destroyed, and with it died something else. The coordination that had made the enemy fleet so deadly suddenly vanished. The connected vessels began moving erratically, crashing into each other, firing at empty space. The web had been broken, and without their spider, the Devourers were lost. "All ships, press the attack," Chen ordered, her voice steady despite the tears running down her face. "Finish them." The volunteer fleet obeyed. What had been a desperate battle became a massacre. Devourer ships that had been deadly threats moments ago were now helpless targets, destroyed by the dozens. Within 3 hours, the enemy armada had been reduced to debris. But the day held one more surprise. As the survivors began recovery operations, sensors detected an anomaly near the destroyed flagship. Something was still alive in the wreckage. Not a ship, not a weapon, something else. Chen ordered a shuttle to investigate, joining the away team personally. What they found changed everything. The Devourer flagship had not been a ship at all. It had been a creature, a living being of vast intelligence and ancient origin. And it was not quite dead. The being lay amid the wreckage, its body broken, but its mind still active. When the away team approached, it reached out to them. Not with physical limbs, but with something stranger. Thoughts, feelings, memories. Admiral Chen felt the contact like a hammer blow to her mind. Images flooded through her consciousness. A galaxy, billions of years ago. A species reaching for the stars. Hope and wonder and the joy of discovery. And then darkness. An enemy from beyond the void. A war that lasted millennia. A desperate choice made to survive. The Devourers had not always been monsters. They had been like the Valanthi once. Peaceful, curious. They had built wonders that would have shamed anything the current galactic civilization had produced. But they had encountered something in the darkness between galaxies, something that had broken them, changed them, turned them into the consuming horde that now threatened all life. The creature's thoughts were fading, its ancient mind finally surrendering to death. But it had one last message to deliver. "Forgive us," the thoughts whispered. "We did not choose this. We were trying to survive. We thought consuming others would fill the void inside us, but it never did. We became the thing we feared." Chen knelt beside the dying being, placing her hand on its cooling flesh. "What was it?" she asked. "The thing that changed you?" The creature's answer was a single image, a void, an absence, a hunger that existed outside of space and time, waiting in the darkness for civilizations to become strong enough to notice. "It found us," the being's thoughts continued, "and now it will find you. We were its servants. its first victims. When we are gone, it will create new ones, unless you stop it. How? How do we stop something like that? The creature's final thought was not words, but a feeling, a strange combination of hope and sorrow. You already know. You showed us today. The only weapon against the void is connection, unity, love. We forgot that. We consumed instead of creating. We took instead of giving, and we became empty. The being died, but its message remained. Admiral Chen stood in the wreckage for a long time, processing what she had learned. The Devourers were defeated, at least for now. The Trellick people were safe. The volunteer fleet had proven that different species could work together against a common threat. But the war was not over. It had barely begun. She returned to the Prometheus and called a meeting of the fleet commanders. Representatives from every species that had volunteered gathered in one room. Humans and aliens, former enemies and ancient rivals, all united by what they had accomplished. The Devourers were victims, she began, explaining what she had learned. They were twisted by something older and darker than any of us imagined, and that something is still out there, waiting, watching, looking for new civilizations to corrupt. The room was silent. The weight of her words pressed down on everyone present. But we have something the Devourers lost, Chen continued. We have each other. Today, ships from a dozen different species fought and died together. Not because we were ordered to, not because it was profitable, because we believed that protecting the innocent matters more than protecting ourselves. She looked around the room, meeting every set of eyes. I'm not going to pretend that defeats the darkness. I don't know if anything can, but I know this. The Devourers tried to survive by consuming, by taking, by destroying, and it made them exactly what they feared. Her voice hardened. We're going to try something different. We're going to survive by building, by giving, by protecting each other even when it costs us everything. And when the darkness comes for us, it's going to find something it's never encountered before. She raised her hand in salute. A galaxy that refuses to be afraid. The commanders rose, returning her salute. Human and alien hands raised together, united in purpose. The volunteer fleet stayed at Trellick Prime for 3 weeks, helping the insectoid beings rebuild their shattered orbital defenses. Engineers from the collective worked alongside human technicians. Corsani warriors trained Trellick pilots in combat tactics. Valanthi scholars documented the culture of this species they had never known existed. And when they finally departed, they left behind more than weapons and supplies. They left hope. The Galactic Council never sanctioned the United Earth Navy. They could not afford to. Public opinion across the galaxy had shifted dramatically after the battles of Valanthi Prime and Trellick. Citizens demanded to know why their governments had abandoned the weak. Politicians scrambled to explain policies that had seemed reasonable before, but now looked like cowardice. Within a year, the Council formally recognized the 1st Galactic Volunteer Fleet as an independent defensive force. They had no choice. The fleet had grown to over 1,000 ships, crewed by volunteers from every known species. It answered to no government and followed no law except one. When someone calls for help, you answer. Admiral Chen continued to command the Prometheus, though the title seemed inadequate for what she had become. She was not just a military leader now, she was a symbol, a reminder that courage and compassion were not weaknesses to be exploited, but strengths that could change the galaxy. Ambassador Kethral returned to his homeworld to help rebuild, but he never forgot what the humans had done. He spent the rest of his life writing the history of the volunteer fleet, documenting every battle, every sacrifice, every moment when strangers chose to die for each other. The book became the most widely translated text in galactic history. Every species that could read eventually encountered Kethral's words, and they learned the same lesson, that a species dismissed as primitives had taught the galaxy what civilization actually meant. That strength without compassion was meaningless, that the measure of a society was not how it treated the powerful, but how it protected the weak. The darkness that had created the devourers never stopped watching. It lurked at the edge of known space, patient and eternal, waiting for the galaxy to tear itself apart, waiting for the connection between species to fail, waiting for the day when fear and selfishness finally won. It would wait forever, because every time it sent new horrors against the civilizations of the galaxy, they were met by ships bearing a simple message, human words translated into 1,000 languages and spoken by 1,000 species. No one stands alone. The phrase was painted on hulls and broadcast on open channels. It became a greeting and a promise, a declaration of intent that echoed across the stars whenever the innocent faced destruction. The universe was vast and dark and filled with dangers beyond counting. But in that darkness, lights had begun to appear. Ships crewed by beings who refused to accept that survival meant abandoning others. Fleets assembled from nothing but hope and determination. An alliance forged not in politics or profit, but in the simple human belief that everyone deserved a chance to live. They called themselves the United Galactic Response Force, but everyone in the galaxy knew them by a different name, the humans' friends, and they answered every call. Admiral Sarah Chen retired after 20 years of continuous service. Her final act as fleet commander was to promote a Valanthi officer to her position, the first non-human to lead the volunteer fleet. A gesture that shocked many and surprised no one who knew her. She spent her remaining years on a small colony world, teaching children about the history of the fleet and the battles that had saved the galaxy. Students of every species came to learn from her. They asked questions about tactics and strategy, about the technology of human dreadnoughts and the politics of the Galactic Council. But the lesson they remembered most was the simplest one. When someone asks for help, you answer. Not because it's easy, not because you'll win, because in the end, we're all just scared beings trying to survive in a universe that doesn't care about us. The only way we make it matter is by caring about each other. On the day Admiral Chen died, peacefully in her sleep at the age of 97, the volunteer fleet held a moment of silence. Every ship in the Armada, spread across 100 star systems, stopped their engines and went dark for 1 minute. Then they returned to their patrols, to their missions, to the endless work of protecting those who could not protect themselves. The galaxy was still dangerous. The darkness still waited. New threats emerged every year, and the fight never truly ended. But humanity had given the galaxy something it had never possessed before, the belief that tomorrow could be better than today, and the courage to fight for it. In the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, where delegates still argued about politics and profit and the balance of power, a new monument had been erected. It showed a human hand reaching down to lift a smaller being from the darkness. Beneath it was engraved the words that had started everything. A single message, sent into the void by a desperate ambassador who had expected nothing in return. A call for aid, and the humans who answered it, with tongues of fire, darkness alone, the day that humanity had arrived.